Hey guys, how's it going? It's Brady from Weather Forecast here, and this is Cristobal update part 4, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And it continues to really do a lot of damage, and this is something that's not going to be, just make landfall and it's over with, It's not going to just dissipate, right? Its remnants are going to combine with upper level cyclone, and it's gonna really impact the Midwest too, and gonna combine with a low pressure moving along into the Midwest, and it's gonna do some damage. Sorry if I'm mumbling a little bit. It's been a long day, but continue to play this out here, and you can just see those rain bands are just moving in, and that's very heavy rainfall. We've seen totals 6, 7, even 8 inches in Mississippi already today. Just tons and tons of rainfall is continuing to happen. So, this isn't over by a long shot. This thing is still going to be cooking well up into Canada, So let's play around a little bit more, and let's observe. We're going to go into some of these rainfall totals estimated. And again, these can tend to be lower many times, but we're talking about, southern Alabama seeing a lot of good rainfall as well. South of Mobile, 3 to 5 inches. But we've seen some reports in the Gulfport area here. We've seen some reports here. I know I drew into the coastline, but 4 to 6 inches widespread here, and exceeding 8 inches. So I know I drew it on the wrong side, but definitely some very big flash flooding that is happening here that is really causing no more flash flood warnings on Gulfport anymore, but there were earlier, and that was causing some really significant flooding. Now shift, it's Alabama's turn now, and central Mississippi now. Just look at these rain bands just pour into here and just drop really good rainfall rates. We're talking 1, 2, even 3 inches per hour in some cases that are just dropping and dropping rainfall. We take a look at some of these estimates, and it's going to be difficult in between where I want to be, but the flash flood warnings state for themselves what is happening. And this is what's making it very concerning, I think, was the rainfall threat. And there was a lot of moisture. This lopsided storm, it's a mix of a tropical and a subtropical storm. I'd say it's maybe in that 60-40 range, tropical, subtropical, somewhere near around the halfway mark. But it had a lot of tropical characteristics, regardless of whether it was subtropical or tropical. There's a ton of moisture here, and it's still continuing to provide wind gusts, in excess of 40, 50 miles an hour on the Mississippi coast and Alabama, even very southern. We're going to shift into that a little bit now and go here and show you some of the wind gusts, and of course that happens. Google's been doing that to me a lot lately now. We'll just shift back. We'll do this the hard way. But we get the bigger screen. So, look at this. We're still gusting, given it's more higher elevated than most are for a reason, but it's not that high of an elevation compared to many stations. But we're still gusting 45 plus miles an hour here on the Alabama coast. We're still at tropical sustained winds, and this has been going on for 12 plus hours now in some of these places, or maybe not 12 plus hours, but definitely I'd say 8 to 10 hours we've been going to tropical storm force winds for a lot of places. Look at that, we're still gusting around 40 miles an hour at the Waveland Yacht Club. They have been taking the brunt. They're 5 feet above level. Their next high tide is 130. looks like around 1:30 p.m. and they're still sitting, with a lot of storm surge. They've been sitting 3 to 5 feet, 3 to even 6 feet of storm surge now. The Waveland Yacht Club for a while now. I said, this is not going to be a 2 to 4 foot storm surge event for a lot of these places. It's going to be a 3 to even 6 foot storm surge event. For places of southeast Louisiana coast and southern Mississippi coast. They've been just really taking brunt. Florida even, we're seeing some 1 to 3 foot, even close to 4 foot storm surge totals there too along the Florida coast. I'm checking on their gusts. Pensacola, they're still gusting. Take a look at them. Yeah, they're still gusting over 30 miles an hour. A lot of these places are still, got strong wind gusts coming in, 35 mile an hour gusts over here, and just the very strong winds are still persisting with this. And even though the storm has made landfall, there's going to be many effects for hours to come. It's gonna take a while for this thing to wrap up because it's a very large system. And large systems, they may not intensify as quickly as smaller systems. Dorian was one of the smaller Cat 5s we've ever seen before. And that's why it was able to intensify so quickly, partially because it was a smaller system. It took less time to get its act together, to organize much faster, unlike Cristobal here. Same with Harvey. Harvey started out as Harvey's a whole different. I'm not going to get into Harvey. Not quite the same, but I did that last time. But Cristobal, very large, disorganized, had just been over land for a while, so it had to regain its tropical characteristics again, which is very difficult to do in a short period of time with unfavorable conditions. So that's why we saw that tropical subtropical mix. If we saw this get into the 60-65 mile per hour range, I think we would have seen a more tropical characteristics as was being modeled. But this thing just never did, and instead we had around a 55 mile per hour tropical storm. That's what I'm going to call it, because I think it was. But it just never got its true act together, and it didn't take the right path to avoid all the wind shear in the beginning. And even towards the end, it just never strengthened, even despite, we saw wind gusts, up to 64 miles an hour in Alabama today, was just unable to quite get its act together. And I mean, this has been the story, for a place like Gulfport all day, just rain bands coming in. They've been seeing 3 to 6 inches widespread along the Mississippi coast, and this is a very storm surge prone area. They have very shallow water in the Gulf of Mexico, and the storm surge is just able to come up and just really impact places. That's why Katrina, 28-foot storm surge, but it's a shallow ground there in the Gulf Coast. The whole Gulf Coast, very shallow water. So take a look here, Shell Beach. They've been getting hit hard too today. They were the highest storm surge totals at over 6 feet today. So they really got hit hard too, and they're gusting. It's been the right side of the storm. I'll go back to radar scope and check in the radar again, but we'll go full screen. No, not here. And that's better. Here we go. So the story has been, so we take a look at the center. We're going to shift radar sites here. So we take a look. Our center, National Hurricane Center, said this was a broad center of circulation. So I'm going to guess, somewhere and around this area is where our center. I'm not going to pinpoint it exactly based on radar. I need satellite to do that better, but I'm not going to go into that right now. So we got some decent winds here moving in this direction. We have, some more winds obviously on the coast. We're getting it here, but our strongest wind gusts have been on this right side the whole time, and that is provided for consistent onshore flow and consistently providing storm surge over the last 12 hours or so. Going back to that high tide mark around anywhere from 11:30 to 3 p.m. along that Gulf Coast was high tide, and just constantly providing water. Some of those images at a wavelength were pretty impressive. Water was covering stop signs in some places, so it was very impressive to see some of those images. So just imagine, if this was a Cat 1 hurricane, with a lower pressure. This was a very low pressure. This is going to go down as an historic tropical storm, because at 50 miles an hour, to be able to provide storm surge over 6 feet, that is very, very impressive. Those are Cat 1, Cat 2 numbers for storm surge. And again, the Gulf is able to just bring that water up because it's very shallow. And that's why we were able to see some of the numbers that we saw today. Places like Shell Beach and Gulfport and Waveland. But my next concern, will shift out here. There's a chance that, places in this range, could see wind gusts. I gotta make this a little broader. Could see wind gusts potentially on this right side. Even here, it's going to be, these places going to be very gusty too. I'll say, these places will be gusting potentially, 25 to 50 miles an hour potentially. But this is the jackpot. We could be seeing gusts in these places 35 to 60 plus miles an hour here. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something that's a little sloppy. I'll fix that. But we're going to see some very strong winds provided from the system, because it's going to combine and it's going to become no longer a fully tropical system, or not fully tropical, but a subtropical tropical mix. These are going to be just remnants of Cristobal, and it's going to be combining with a mid-latitude cyclone rather, and it's going to be dropping heavy rainfall. We're talking places into the Ozarks. We're talking Iowa even. These places have the potential. I don't know why I got so skinny there, but some of these places, we're talking 2 to 4 inches of rain in some places. 4 to 6. That's the kind of rainfall we're talking about. And this area has been getting slammed all ever since the winter. They've been getting really hit hard with lots of rainfall. We've seen lots of flash flooding. Not too long ago, Illinois and Chicago, we were talking about 5 to 8 inches of rain there. So that was one big flood event, and this is going to be another one. And this has just been a very impressive event to look at from a meteorological standpoint. I don't know if we'll see another event like this in a long time. But as I was saying, if this was a Cat 1 hurricane, say 80 mile an hour winds, that onshore flow would have been even more impressive. And assuming we saw pressure, if this was Cat 1, it probably would have been 975 millibars. Given the kind of system it was, if it was able to strengthen to that, would have seen some astronomical high tides, some very high storm surge totals. We could have seen potentially in excess of 9 feet potentially, which is Cat 3, Cat 4 range. So those are some very high totals. We saw storm surge wise today, 4 to 6 feet all on the Mississippi coast, and it's just, again, very storm surge prone area. We'll shift to Florida for a second, and then we'll call it a wrap. So they're just about done. We'll shift to this radar site. There we go. So they've been seeing very heavy rainfall too. Panama City, Pensacola, they've been getting hit with rain bands today consistently. Lots of squalls moving into the area. And, they've been impressive. Just some of the rainfall totals too coming out. 3 to 5 inches widespread across the panhandle. But the most impressive rainfall totals so far, have came out of this area today. And I'll shift to those. And we'll go down to the rainfall totals, storm totals. Shift out of that. I mean, look at these. These are radar estimates. They usually undercut them too. We go down and inspect. I mean, we've seen 8 to 12 inches of rain here. There are radar estimates with over 12 inches of rain. And they've just been extraordinary and very impressive to see these kind of amounts. And these totals go back to yesterday too. Some of these places, these rain bands, we're seeing over a foot of rain too. And we've had reports of 13 inches of rain, come out of this area. So just some very impressive rainfall totals in there. And the rain was just continuing to fire up and bring tornadoes, supercell thunderstorms. Today earlier we saw a tornado. I believe it was it Lake City? I think we almost had one there. I think we had a tornado. I think it might have been the Lake City area. Yeah, it was Lake City, where I think we had a confirmed tornado today. So we've had, I want to say at least, 4 or 5 tornadoes somewhere from this event alone. We've had many tornado warnings, many. It's just to list a few, but the impacts continue to come for the Mississippi, Alabama coasts, Louisiana. New Orleans, you're not done yet. You are not done yet, because these rain bands are going to move in. If you miss them, then, or if dry air tries to work their way in, then you might be safe. But you are not out of the question yet. There's a reason the Weather Prediction Center highlighted you for very likely for flash flooding over the next few days. You happen to get lucky today, that doesn't mean you're going to be lucky tomorrow. See how these rain bands here are just moving in and continuing to provide moisture here. Okay, so it's going to be flipped around almost, and this moisture is going to be up here, and rain bands are just going to continue to work their way in. That's the forecast for tomorrow. So that's why New Orleans, and we could definitely see some convective development with that. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some tornado warnings tomorrow, because just because of that backside can provide, this is a lopsided storm. There's been sheer, that's why Florida's been able to work their way with tornadoes, is because, again, this has been a high shear environment, and they've been able to just get that supercell development. And I'm not saying it's going to be high shear development tomorrow, but there's definitely going to be a little bit of shear to work on the backside for New Orleans, and they're going to be able to get these rain bands just set up, and sometimes they can just drop down 2-3 inches of rain, in an hour or two, and that can really provide some extraordinary flash flood. New Orleans very prone to flash flooding, so they're no stranger. I think 2016 floods were pretty bad for them. They got hit by Harvey pretty hard too. They have some events that they've gone through. So, but that's it for tonight. I think I'm going to wrap it up with that. Mississippi, Alabama, Florida Panhandle, Southeast Louisiana, you got to work your way with some more rainfall tonight. Gusty winds. Gusts will continue to be 50 plus miles an hour. Gusts 50 plus miles per hour are possible, and on any of these locations. This is a wide area. Gusts 50 plus miles an hour are possible. I should really just broad this out and say gusts 50 plus miles an hour are possible really in any of this area. It's just such a wide range for tropical storm force winds. Wind gusts are possible in any of those areas. So that's what we're talking about for the rest of the evening. But yeah, that just about does it. And stay safe. And just know this thing isn't over yet. Midwest, you're up next.